Hello everyone, and welcome to the Future of Space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guest today is Tom Mueller. Tom is the founder and CEO of Impulse Space, a company providing in-space transportation and logistics, including last-mile satellite delivery, Mars and lunar transportation, and other space activities to support the development of the space economy. Tom was one of the founding members of SpaceX, where he was responsible for building and leading the propulsion development group, which develops propulsion systems and engines for the Falcon and Starship launch vehicles and the Dragon spacecraft. At SpaceX, Mueller led development of the Merlin rocket engine, which powers the Falcon 9, the most reliable launch vehicle in history. He cultivated the original team that led to the development of the next generation Raptor engine that will eventually enable humans to become a multi-planet species. Tom, welcome to the Future of Space.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Tom, share with us 3 words that for you captures the essence of space.
Well, I think the first word would be infinite. I think the enormity of space is truly mind-boggling. I think it's one of the few things that you truly cannot absolutely wrap your mind around how big space is. I often think about that because I want to travel out into space, and it's just, it's incredible. Inspiring. I've been inspired by space since, I was a child. To me, it's one of the most inspiring things. And future. I think space always represents the future. And I feel my company is here because I feel that our future depends on the resources of space. So those are my 3 words.
When you were a kid growing up, did you actually think that this was a possibility, or it was science fiction and became a reality?
I was always super interested in science, read science fiction books, watched Star Trek, the original series when I was a kid, and just really thought about space a lot. Always really wanted to see what's out there. I think we had this promise that we're going to be I was 9 years old when we landed on, or 8 years old when we landed on the moon, and I just felt like this is our future, and it just really didn't happen. I feel frustrated that it's happened quite slowly, really, from the way it was going when I was a child. I just want to make it accelerate our adventures into space.
Well, you definitely have done good, because we are way more advanced because of your work and because of your visions.
I'm pretty proud of what we've achieved, both at SpaceX and now at Impulse, of really pushing the ball forward to make space a reality for more people and more useful to humanity.
I'll share with you, and I think if I've told you when we were together in Antarctica, I was never a space geek or space fan, or I've never looked up thinking that we could go there. As an explorer and someone who has spent many nights, in the wilderness looking up into the stars, I've always felt humble and understood that there was so much more. But to see ourselves, it was, I couldn't connect the dots. But watching those 2 rockets landing upright, for me, it was my Apollo moment. It was the day that something happened in my brain, right? It saw the world differently, and I understood in that moment. It was a reality, it was going to happen, and it really connected me so quickly to this history of what we do as a species. We see an horizon, we see a place to go, and it's only a question of time until we figure out the technology to go there, whether it's climbing a mountain, whether it's going across a river, across an ocean. And space is ultimately, we are that medium that just takes life to new places, which will lead to my second question. Beyond the science and the technology of space, what is the human story of space?
I think the human story is unfolding, and I think it's going to be, if we are going to continue to grow economically and socially, we are going to deplete the resources of Earth, and the only way to get past that is space. So that's why I want to help develop space, so that we can continue human growth and human prosperity.
Do you think this pressure of the environment is the same throughout pretty much everything, but the scale now is different? If you look, like, hypothetically, if all the kids and the grandkids and every single kid that you had would live under the same house, not only, it would become super crowded and busy, and there would be fights everywhere. But the necessity to go to new places is built within the foundation of life. North America was a solution for Europe. Europe was crowded and was a miserable place, so miserable that people were willing to get onto a ship and cross just for a new start. Is it just that it's a little bit harder for people now to understand it and to grasp it because we've reached the capacity of a planet?
It's not a population problem. I think, most projections see the population peaking at around 10 billion, and I think the Earth can support 10 billion people in the near term. And it's not going to be an overpopulation program unless something drastically changes on birth rate. It's a resource. If you look at resource per person, especially in the developing world, it continues to go up. And with compute, especially with AI, crypto, compute is just demanding more rare earths, more resources, more server farms, and mostly more power. And the power it will probably be the first thing that'll crush us. There's projections that the amount of power required for compute before 2050 will equal total world power right now, just for compute. So how do we move compute off of the planet? How do we really infinite power in space? But certainly within just out of our sun, there's so much power that could provide us for thousands of years. So there's just many reasons why, if we're going to continue economic growth like we have, where individual use of resources continues to expand, there's got to be some relief valve, which is the infinite resources of space.
I wrote this piece about how that vision of a battery economy and the future where everything is electric, the only way that it can exist is if we find a way to mine off the planet. Because if we have to mine, we have to extract all these resources that we need. It's going to be as destructive as fossil fuel has been. There's no way around it. But you look at Europe, and again, the same thing that fueled the expansion was also resources. Every single tree was cut. Population could have continued, but it was resources that drove. In terms of power, do you feel that the fundamental of energy has not necessarily changed in a long time? Right, in many decades. Do you think that we're with AI now, with the advance of AI and our knowledge, and do you think that we're on the cusp of a revolution, a radical revolution in energy and what can be done and what we can do?
I think with AI, we're on a revolution of everything. I really believe that superintelligence is going to happen. I'm one of the people that think that artificial superintelligence is near. I don't think the predictions that we had, there was a great book about artificial intelligence called Superintelligence by Bostrom that came out maybe 10 years ago, where he had laid out many different ways that artificial intelligence and eventually superintelligence could happen, not realizing the power of LLMs, large language models. And I think since then, we found out that these neural networks, that we understand how a neural network work, but we don't understand really how it can take all the data that it finds and come up and be so powerful. So all of a sudden, the predictions reaching superintelligence have moved way up. And so we're presented with this problem where we're going to have a machine smarter than us before we're ready for it. It's going to help solve this energy problem. It's going to help solve many world problems, or it's going to create even worse problems, maybe even existential. So there's nothing we can do about it. It's going to happen. Either we're going to do it, or the Chinese are going to do it, or somebody's going to do it. So we just got to try and do it safely and write it out. But I think if there's a good outcome, it's going to be great for space, because when you combine AI with robotics, like the Tesla robots, and there's some other companies that are developing a robotic body with a really detailed hands that can learn. So now you're generating data at a massive rate like we do, and also visual data and dexterity, to where robots can become as good as us at building and have a mind that can think. So now a robot in space is way better than a human in space. I mean, humans need to go to space just for the adventure, and I believe humans have a place in space, but it's really expensive to put humans in space. If you're going to develop space, AI and robotics are going to revolutionize that.
So what are the answers right now that you're trying to discover in propulsion where AI can see, or you're hoping will help you give you the answer?
Right now, chemical propulsion is peaked. There's not much more you can get. We're running close to 99% combustion efficiency. We're running huge area ratio nozzles at high pressure. You can't get any more out of a chemical. So the next thing is nuclear fission, and eventually fusion. And the problems of running a fusion rocket, the problem is when you do fission, you have very high energy neutrons and gamma rays and ionizing radiation that goes through centimeters of metal. When you have fusion, you have much higher energy neutrons and gamma rays that go through feet or miles of metal. So how do you convert that kind of energy into thrust? It's a problem. It just goes through. Shielding doesn't work. If you have people there, these high energy neutrons go all the way through the shields and through the people. So you need superintelligence to solve that problem. If you're going to like thinking about a starship, I've actually, being an engineer, a propulsion engineer, I've done these calculations. Like, how can you get to the nearest star using this theoretical either fission or even a fusion rocket? And in order to get there, have enough thrust to get there in enough time that a human could do it, that the amount of energy, the amount of power you need is on the order of hundreds of gigawatts or terawatts of power. I don't think we're going to solve that. I don't think the human brain power is enough to understand and solve that problem without the help of a superintelligence.
I think that everybody can see that nuclear can be a solution for once we're off the planet or in space. Do you think that nuclear can be a solution to get off the planet?
No, I think nuclear thermal, like the Nerva rocket, it's just too dangerous. It spews, the fuel breaks up and it spews too many radioactive particles. I don't think it's ever going to be allowed to operate in the atmosphere. Once you get in space, though, that's the future, really. That's the next propulsion breakthroughs are going to be nuclear fission, I believe, and probably nuclear electric propulsion, not nuclear thermal. I think nuclear electric, the calculations I've done is it's all about how much delta V you can add to a single stage. And the chemical rockets, like our Helios, our biggest rocket, can add maybe 8 or 9 kilometers per second. And I could see a nuclear electric stage adding maybe up to almost 40 kilometers per second out of a single stage. So huge advance in getting out. This could allow you to get to the outer planets, and even like we did the flyby of Pluto, but you're going so fast you just get like 7 minutes of video of pictures as you fly by. With nuclear electric, with a big nuclear electric system, you could actually go into orbit around Pluto and stay there and study it for years, because you have enough delta V to actually slow down and enter orbit as you get there.
It's funny because that was one thing that recently that I saw about these satellites that we send, and then the orbit that they have is so big, right? They come really close and then they go way, 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 way out so that they come back. And the reason they do that, if I understand correctly, is if they don't, then they would crash into the planet, correct?
There's several different reasons why. Like around Jupiter, the radiation is so intense that they don't want to stay in that radiation zone. So they do a huge, highly eccentric orbit. They go way out. They have time to, while they're way out there, to transmit all the data. Then they come in and make a pass and take a lot of pictures up close. Maybe go past the inner planets like Io, stay in that radiation for hours and then get back out. But I think, like the outer planets, to get to them, they're so far out there, you have to go so fast. You're talking tens of kilometers per second that you just fly right past. You're going so fast by the time you get out there that you can't enter orbit. But with a very high performance propulsion system like nuclear electric, you can actually start slowing down as you get closer and enter orbit. So now you can, around these outer gas giants like Neptune, Uranus, and certainly Pluto, now you have the possibility of staying there and studying it like we have Saturn and Jupiter and Mars.
You mentioned Star Trek. I assume that you also watched The Expanse.
Oh yeah, that great show.
It was really interesting the first time that someone watches The Expanse and has not read the books, but that the idea that you have to spend such a dedicated time in slowing yourself down. You had the spacecraft who would turn around and basically kind of back up into their destination, because you watch Star Trek or you watch Star Wars and it's only, you move and then you stop. But in space it doesn't work like that.
The Expanse was very much more realistic. It did have some foibles. Like I remember the one like early on when, I forget, the guy they had that Latter-day Saints space station that he was working on, and Or no, he was at one of the asteroids, and that Latter-day Saints thing came by at 26 kilometers per second, and he had to jump onto it or do something. It's doing 26 kilometers per second, and then they show it coming up and going by, and I go, wait a minute, it's going to be 26 kilometers away, and then 1 second later it's going to be there, and 1 second later it's going to be 26 kilometers gone. So it looked like it was doing 200 miles an hour pass, not 26 kilometers per second pass. I go, they missed it right there.
Do you find yourself watching movies and really being challenged of shutting down your engineering mind and not enjoying the entertainment?
I still enjoy it, but it's the curse of being an engineer. Yeah, it's like, oh boy, they really blew it on that one.
Like even superheroes, or I'm always watching movies. I'm like, no, that would not happen. Like when the typical someone falling down from the building and Superman flies down and grabs the arm, and then the person is scooped away. It's like, no, the arm would be in your hands, and then the person would still be.
The physics don't work out. Yeah, I mean, suspend disbelief only works up to a certain point. At some point, you just go, oh man, they lost the plot here.
There was this documentary on Christopher Reeve's Superman, and some of the footage from the previous movies. There's a scene where there's a fire and he gets to a lake. I don't know if you remember, and he blows on the lake to freeze the lake. And then he picks up the ice sheet just from his place, and he breaks it up and then flies it and then drops it over the fire. A bit far-fetched. So you just said that right now we've reached pretty much 99% of chemical propulsion. So what are you guys are working on now at Impulse, trying to push that needle to new places?
Making it low cost, reliable. I mean, really, if you think about what SpaceX did, they didn't invent anything new. The Merlin engine that we developed was a GG cycle. It wasn't even stage combustion like Raptor. So it's not even the most advanced cycle. It's just, I always call my Merlin engine the small block Chevy of rocket engines. It was lightweight, moderately efficient, super reliable. And it just, and low cost, very easy and low cost to make. So it's just like the small block Chevy engine of rocket engines. So what we did is just brought the cost way down and brought the reliability way up. So there was always this old thing about NASA: faster, better, cheaper. Can you do it? Pick two, or maybe even only pick one. SpaceX showed that you can do all three. In fact, if you do faster and cheaper, it does become better because you make a lot more of them. It's just like the Toyota cars. They kind of historically have been super reliable, low cost, and faster, better, cheaper.
Neil deGrasse would definitely agree with you, because he comes out with the videos like SpaceX did not invent anything, implying that NASA had figured out the technology. Just like what you said, what SpaceX brought was being reliable and the cost for it.
Yeah, we really optimized for cost, not for performance. Performance was decent, but we're really optimizing for cost. And that's the same thing I'm dealing with Impulse. Like, we picked our propellants for Impulse that we're using for storables is nitrous oxide methane, not hypergols, not hydrazine, super toxic, self-igniting, just because of the cost and the reliability aspects.
Because for a rocket like Blue Origin, who does the Shepard, the New Shepard and New Glenn, you can use something like hydrogen for the New Shepard, but if you get bigger, you have to get to the methane and bigger fuels.
I think methane really is the ultimate fuel. In fact, I picked it. The original Starship was hydrogen. The original Raptor design that I did was with a hydrogen engine. And then once I did the Mars studies, I found out that if you had, for every pound of hydrogen that you made on Mars, you could get 8 pounds of methane for free. And so I did the calculation. I told Elon, I said, it's half the cost to take a ton to Mars and bring it back if we use methane instead of hydrogen. So we switched the vehicle over to methane. I often say now, if people ask me if you would have changed anything back in the early days of SpaceX, and I would have not done RP1. I would have not kerosene for the Falcon 9, but methane. Methane is the right propellant.
Hindsight is always 20/20. Did you, when you got into building engines in the rocket business, did you ever think we would get to where we are today, or did you go in hoping one day this is going to be possible and actually we're going to be beyond that?
I've always been an optimist. I think that's why what Elon saw in me when we first talked, and I was pretty optimistic about doing things, but I really didn't had no idea that we would achieve what SpaceX has achieved. I think the one person more optimistic and driven than me is Elon, and so we've done some pretty incredible things with his leadership.
I can't remember, but SpaceX existed before Elon came in, right? Or
No, Tesla did. He started, in fact, there's this saying, I ended up being employee number one at SpaceX in payroll. And that's not because I started SpaceX, certainly. It's because I signed first. But Elon incorporated SpaceX on Pi Day 2002, so that'd be March 14th. And I started on May 1st. So how I ended up being employee number one, I don't know. But it was lucky for me, and it probably really pisses him off.
I don't necessarily want to get too far with Elon, but in general, do you believe for an entrepreneur or for a visionary to be able to break the status quo or to break these new boundaries, you do need to have a certain personality, whether you look at the Howard Hughes or the Steve Jobs or the Fords, or to be able to dismiss what can and can't be done. It's a double-edged sword.
It's funny because as you're making that question, I was thinking like Steve Jobs, Ford, Elon's like that. That's not the way I operate my company, but I think to be at the extreme level that these guys did, like even Tesla himself, were really hard-edged people, and it takes a certain mentality and maybe a certain upbringing. Like when I read the first Elon book by Ashley Vance, even though at the time I read the book, I'd known Elon for like 13 years. I learned so much about his psyche by what he went through in South Africa and with his dad and as a child. It's how did he develop the way he was? And it's all these inputs, both genetic and your environment. So it was kind of more understand the man.
Did you read the next one with Isaac?
Oh, yeah. I have my own chapter in that book, which is pretty cool. Like four pages.
Just in parentheses, I just shared with you that I was in conversation with Merlin, who went up to the North Pole and South Pole, and we were talking about how he had made an observation about how most of the big explorers who have done the things that he did and others, you just look at their father-son relationship, and to see, how dysfunctional or how absent the father was, and those people end up often, it's a commonality. And you look at Elon's relationship with his own father and so much of who he is today. I hope your relationship with your father was better at the time.
Mine was great. My dad, he was a nice guy, but he was also a hardcore logger and expected a lot from us. He didn't give us anything. We had to work for it. He taught me the work ethic, but he also taught me, I think my optimism came from that side of the family. So the influence from my father was very good.
When we were in Antarctica, you gave a presentation from logger to SpaceX. Was that a future that was given to you by your parents, or how did these dots connect?
That was totally self-started for the most part. I had no influence to go to college even. I didn't know what an engineer was. I think I talked about it in that talk. It's kind of one of my famous stories is that when I was I think a freshman in high school, I took a math class, and my math teacher recognized I was actually second in the school. I found out later in math, in the aptitude tests, and I did good in math, and my teacher said, "Tom, you're going to be an engineer, right?" I go, "No, I'm going to be a mechanic." And he's just like, "Do you want to be the guy that invents the planes or the guy that fixes the plane?" Changed my life. So it was external influences that got me to where I'm at. My dad gave me work ethic and a great disposition, but I wanted to go build rocket engines. I mean, once I got into college as a mechanical engineer, I knew then how to design. I kind of, once I took fluid dynamics and combustion and thermodynamics, I kind of knew at that point what it took to do a rocket engine. And at that point, I decided I want to develop liquid rockets. That set me on the path.
You could have gone to F1. I mean, you could have gone to figuring out how to make cars faster, but you decide to skip that step and just go straight to the rocket.
Well, it was always engines. I remember when I was in 6th grade, in our grade school, there was a high school level book on internal combustion engines. And I remember at the end of the school year, you signed to check it out. And my name was all the way down the page because I checked that book out every time. I had that book the whole. My dad would walk me through it, how the valves worked and everything in an engine. I just was fascinated by engine, by any type of heat engine. I was fascinated by steam. I had a steam engine that I still have, that I got when I was, maybe 12 years old for Christmas, a little toy steam engine. I was just always a really fascinated by engines. So rocket engines are like the ultimate heat engine. So that's where I gravitated towards.
You're fascinated by steam engines, and so much of our power, even nuclear energy, it's literally just to create steam so that it can turn something. I mean, the fundamentals of our relationship with energy or engine has been extremely rudimentary for a long time. It's still the same process until we have to find something else.
Yeah, that's the Rankine cycle where you pump a liquid and then heat it to a gas and use the gas to extract the energy and then recondense it back to a liquid. That's the most efficient way to do one of these thermodynamic cycles. When we talk about doing power on Mars, we would love to do Rankine cycle. It's a little bit more difficult to do in space, so you end up doing a Brayton cycle, which is like a jet engine where you just you stay gas. But now you have to pump gas, which takes a lot more power. So when you pump liquid, it takes much less power because it's more dense. So the volumetric efficiency is way better. So that's why pumping water into your boiler and making steam and then using that to drive the turbine and then recondensing it back down to water to pump up to high pressure again is the most efficient way. It's just nobody's found a better cycle than Rankine cycle, and that's really the ultimate cycle. It's really the technology now of how you make the heat.
All the work that we're working to achieve now with hydrogen or nuclear, is it ultimately to still work in that equation, or they will be able to create a new process?
Well, nuclear, when you talk about nuclear electric, a Rankine cycle would be the ultimate way to get the most efficient power to drive those cycles. Typically, a space engine like that is going to be Brayton. But now when you start talking about nuclear thermal, now it's a rocket cycle typically, but do you just heat hydrogen with this thing, or do you make it so hot you actually gasify the nuclear material, like the nuclear light bulb? Maybe add some hydrogen to it also. But now it's a whole new cycle where you're just so hot you're vaporizing and making a plasma out of metal or out of an oxide, and temperatures are millions of degrees. How do you contain that? How do you protect yourself from that heat? It's like the hard part to solve. But it's really like it all comes down to Carnot efficiency. It's just the ratio of your hot side to your cold side. So you want to be as hot as possible, millions of degrees, and then reject to cold space. That's your ultimate efficiency.
Do you find yourself at night just asking ChatGPT all these different questions to see what it will come up?
I used ChatGPT quite a bit, and then I started using GROK 3, which is great. But if GROK 3 was an intern, I would fire it, because I asked it some specific rocket questions about how to drain a tank, a saturated liquid tank like nitrous, and it kept getting it wrong. It didn't even do the mass balance right. Like the first law of thermodynamics. I go, no, at the end it dumped all the liquid and didn't account for the vapor left in the tank. I go, wait, you forgot the vapor. Oh yeah, you're right. Let me do it again. I did it, and I forgot the vapor again. I'm like, you're fired. Like, to use AI for engineering, you have to understand the problem, because it'll get it wrong. You have to manage it. So it's just not ready yet to really be. That's why it's going to be a while before I think engineers are going to be replaced by the AI. But in a while, it might be a year or two, not 10 years. Who knows? It's evolving really fast.
I mean, I find I'm in the camp that truly believes that I think that we give ourselves not enough credit. We evolve with the technology around us. We're not going to become obsolete. We use these tools. The work shifts and moves around, but I think these are tools, and we end up using them in good and bad ways, and there are always pros and cons for each. But recently I watched this segment about how in the span of a year they were able to find all the different ways that amino acids would fold. Years and years and years of like incremental improvements, and then suddenly this one basically kind of created all the options.
Just in the last couple of years, they all of a sudden went exponential, yeah, because of AI.
To go back to your father, you said that your father was a logger. You grew up in that world, and he gave you a sense of being optimistic and also work ethic. From being a logger, share more about that.
During high school, I worked at the grocery store. I was a box boy, a bagger, at their local grocery store. And my dad drove truck for most of my childhood. He drove a logging truck. I'd ride with him in the truck. Sometimes he would loggers work insane hours. If you were first at the loader in the morning, he'd have to get up at like 1, 2 a.m. and be at the loader at 3 a.m. It's ridiculous. And he would try to wake us up, and I always felt bad for my dad because he'd say, Mike, I had two other brothers, like, Tommy, you want to go with me in the truck today? No, I don't want to wake up. David, you want to go? No, I'm too tired. I just felt bad. We're so tired, we didn't want to get up, but I felt like my dad really wanted somebody to come with him, and he loved it when we would go with him. But then about the time I was in the middle of high school, he switched over to working in the woods with a cat, skidding the logs, not hauling them in a truck, which is actually an easier job. He had more control of it, he could just do it himself. And so that the last year I was in high school, that summer, he taught me how to fall trees and how to log with him. So I worked with him that whole summer, and then I went to my first year of college, and then from then on, during the summers, I worked as a logger because I could make good money in the summer. It paid pretty well. I could make up to a couple $100 a day, which for a college student at that time, back in the early '80s, that was good money. I could pay for college. So I became, for about 5 summers, I worked as a logger and put myself through college.
What was his perspective on life makes you say that he shared with you, being optimistic?
My dad had a great sense of humor. Everybody loved him. I remember he was just like, everybody would always say, man, your dad's such a great guy. Your dad's such a great guy. He was just a nice guy. He was kind, but dedicated. Like, you could count on him. And he always told me, you can do, whatever you want. You can be what you want. But he didn't encourage me to go to college until I got into college. And he's like, you need to finish this. Like, you don't want to be a logger the rest of your life. Like, hell no. Like, he's not the one that said you need to go to college and do this. He thought I was going to be a logger. Who knows? I don't think he saw that, oh, you're super smart, you're going to be an engineer. But once I found the path, he certainly encouraged it.
I think that we underestimate. I mean, I'm always fascinated with logging company. Yes, it's controversial. It's a question of resource. But if you really look at the engineering feat of what they accomplish, you look at the side of a mountain, and you just go, it's insane. I have no idea how they managed to do it, and yet they do it. I mean, even the outdoor industry, they want the outdoors to be accessible, and then they're always blaming the lugging company, but then they always use the roads that the lugging companies have created.
Take it even a step further. You have people protesting logging, but they live in wooden houses. It's like, okay, you can't have it both ways. You need to give up on your house, or you need to allow logging. I mean, logging is a renewable resource too. Like, there's very little. They should preserve virgin forests like they have. Actually, in the center of Idaho has the biggest virgin forest, the mallard larkin area, in the continental United States. You have to go to Alaska to find a bigger natural forest. But there's also, like, all the areas around my hometown of St. Mary's have all been logged many times over, and they grow back. Take about every 40 years you can re-log it. So it's a renewable resource completely.
Now, you're a car fan.
Huge, yeah.
Do you still prefer like a real engine car than an electric car?
I love both. I just bought Linda a Tesla Model S. This is her third Tesla, and this one has full self-driving. I love it. I like to go to work in the morning when you get up tired, you're having your coffee. It drives. You can just drink your coffee, listen to the stereo, or listen to a podcast. I'm happy with that. On a weekend, I'm glad to take like my GT3 RS out and go rip around the canyons up in Malibu. And I was just racing last weekend in my Porsche Cup car. So all of the above, it's the right tool for the job. But a comfortable car for driving back and forth to work that's electric is hard to beat. Electric for around town is really hard to beat.
Tristan and I were looking for a new vehicle. For the type of traveling that we do, electric, not going to work. We're looking for definitely a hybrid. But like in town, I look at what we do and everything. It's like, yes, electric is going to be so much easier. I do drive faster with the electric.
They're super fast, yeah. They're quiet and fast. It's like stealthy. In my GT3 RS, if I do that, like a cop 2 blocks away knows you're breaking the law. But in an electric car, you just only the guy next to you knows that you're breaking the law.
So Porsche is your vehicle of choice when it comes to engine?
I love all cars. Porsche just has refined the 911 as a race car for decades. It's like the Merlin engine. It's the most efficient, cost-effective race car.
Is it really?
Yeah, they're super fast for their car. Like Ferraris are fast too, but they're so expensive to run and hard to get. Porsches are just great race cars.
Porsche have remained through the times unique in the way that they look. So many, I mean, even BMW changed design when they had the American designer who went in and basically really changed the round approach to what you would associate to a European car, to a more angled look. But Porsche has remained, you can see it from really, really far away, and you can say this is a Porsche, which is hard in nowadays.
They've remained true to their brand and to their technology. They're solid. I really love Porsches. I've got a bunch of them. I've got a bunch of Porsche race cars. I got a bunch of Porsche street cars. I've got a Porsche Taycan electric car. They're the best.
Is there one design that for you was a total miss in their history?
My Taycan is in the shop for the second time to replace the batteries. So they've had that big miss. Like, this is the first time in my history that I've had a lemon on a Porsche. And it's a known thing with the first year of the Taycan. They missed it on the batteries. So they're batting about 900.
I have to connect you. So Stefan, huge Porsche fan, but he was saying the electric Porsche is an absolute lemon, and it's better to just wait until the next couple ones.
There's a lot of them getting lemon lot, I found out, yes. It's pretty embarrassing for Porsche, but I'll just say this, the 911, especially the GT3 RS, is phenomenal. If you look at the numbers on that car, like its horsepower and its mass, it smokes McLarens that have 200 more horsepower and are lighter. It's unbelievable how fast that car is. If you look at the numbers, it's just phenomenal.
And the sound is important. There are a lot of cars out there that are interesting, but the sound, I can't. For me, it's a big turnoff. It has to be a right balance.
It's hard to beat a flat six that revs to 9,000 RPM. Yeah.
Between you and I, I've always found the sound of the Aston Martin was always a nice one.
Especially the V12s, yeah.
Yeah. Tom, what would be Tom's 3 words of wisdom?
First, the one that I've learned from my father would be truth. Always be truthful and honesty, and curiosity. That's me. And I think also from my dad, kindness. Truth, curiosity, and kindness.
Well, he was a big teacher in your life.
Yeah, big influence on me and my siblings, yes.
Your mom also, or your father was more the...
Mom too. Mom, dad was always working. Mom ran the show. She raised us, really. But parents are super important. My dad passed away in 2016 from Alzheimer's. Really kind of young. He was 76. A huge loss, really.
Sorry for your loss, but I mean, they did an amazing job, because what you've been able to accomplish and what you've done and what you do is an example. So it was so great to get to know each other in Antarctica. Now we're going to the Galapagos together, so yeah. It's going to be fun. Next time that I come down, I know that we missed each other last time for lunch, but we'll go for a drive. For me, I think that the circumstances in my life has not made me race or drive more, but I love driving. I love racing. First of all, the people are always surprised, but ever since I've always driven with 2 feet, even automatic. My father was driving like this, and I drove stick shift all my life. And when it went to automatic, I kept my 2 feet, 1 foot on the brakes and 1 foot on the accelerator. And then when I take curves, I always take them as if I'm looking for the most efficient line. So, Tom, it was a pleasure. Thank you so very much, and wishing you and Impulse and all the team all the best for taking us to the next step. I think it's going to be a fascinating journey.
It is. Thank you, Daniel.
All right. Until next time.
You bet.